This video will teach you everything you need to know about photo colorization. You'll discover how to transform an old black and white photograph into a natural looking image with beautiful and decently accurate colors. I've been working with old photos on a daily basis for years, so I can definitely share some helpful photo colorization tips and advice. If you have basic Photoshop skills, this tutorial will be easy for you to follow. So let's get started. Before we start colorizing this old photo, I want to mention one thing. If your photo is old and damaged, has cracks, stains, dust or any other type of damage, we need to restore photo first. So if you want to learn everything you need to know about restoration, check this video. Okay, let's get back to colorization. As you can see, this photo is clear and doesn't have any damage. So we can proceed with colorization right away, but I'd still recommend you to use some adjustment layer inside Photoshop in order to make photo look better. So the best idea is to start with polishing and improving some details before we proceed with colorization. Feel free to use any adjustment layer you prefer, something like curves, levels or brightness and contrast in order to make photo look more appealing. Don't forget, if you ever feel you get overboard with these enhancements, it's never too late to just decrease their opacity or just make, for example, curves less extreme. It's very repetitive and simple, so take your time doing this. Let's speed up this part of the video so we can proceed with flat color layers. What are flat color layers? These are layers usually created with adjustment layers that have information about areas that have same or very similar colors. There are no strict rules or strict number of layers you need to use for this, just try to make it logical. It really depends on photo you colorize, but I'd recommend you to have around 5-6 layers, sometimes more, sometimes less. Number of layers is not important, but be careful. If you create too much layers, for example something like 15 to 12 layers, it will be difficult for you to actually manage this many layers. As you can see right now, I'm using quick selection tool in order to select only skin. Don't worry, as you can see I already selected lips, nose and eyes too, but we will fix this later. Also, it is important to mention that Photoshop, as with any other photo editing or most video editing softwares, have layers hierarchy, and we work in hierarchy too. So for example, we'll start with the biggest, most general selections and most general flat layer colors, for example a selection of the whole skin or even the whole face, hair included. And then on top of this we'll create more and more flat color layers in order to add more and more specific color details. So let's start with selecting the color for the skin. Don't worry, it looks like some modern kind of art. We'll make it look normal in a second. It's hard to explain how exactly to pick color of the skin, so I just recommend you to play with it. The main rules are to select colors that have low saturation and are bright. As you can see, I've changed the color blending mode of the layer from normal to color. So now I can play with skin tone in real time and see how it affects the actual color of the face. Don't worry, on this stage any color you'd pick would look weird on the face just because of how we do this, but we will fix it later, just trust the process. So now that we finished with the skin, let's proceed with hair. Similarly how we did with face, we can select hair now. So just use any selection tool you prefer and try to make it as accurate as possible, but don't worry because we will blend those layers a bit later. So don't stuck and try to make this selection absolutely perfect. And now let's do the same thing we did with the skin color layer. So while having the selection, just click on Add Adjustment Layer and click Solid Color. You can play with color from the very start, or you can firstly change the blending mode from normal to color, so you will be able to see actual real changes in color, not just flat one tone on top of the image. Until this moment we didn't even cover how to select color properly, and since this tutorial is mostly for beginners, I'd recommend you to either just find some good references of the color of the skin from the internet, for example. Just photos of other people with similar light conditions and something like this. Maybe some palettes from the internet, or the best case scenario, if you have a reference photo of the same person you're trying to colorize that already has color, so you can just try and copy color from there to this photo. Science of picking color is actually quite complex, but in general, for a beginner, I'd recommend you to just pick color that generally looks just believable and natural. Repeating the same process with suit, background and anything else on the photo. Don't worry, some small and very specific details like eyes, lips and tie will be colorized separately later. Okay, now that we have all those flat color layers ready, let's proceed with actually making them looking natural. And for this we will use blend if option. Just double click the layer and you open this menu. On the bottom part of this window you'll see two sliders. Let me explain which one to use and why. So shortly speaking, top slider will remove pixels, bright or dark, from the current layer, and bottom slider will remove pixels of current layer from all layers underneath it. Let me explain with this gradient. So on the left side of this gradient we have bright blue color, on the right side we have white color. As you can see, both top and bottom sliders have two handles. So if you try to move the handle on the left from the darker pixels to the right to the brighter pixels, you'll start removing dark pixels of this current layer, so gradient layer, from this layer, not from layers underneath. As you can see, since darker pixels are on the left, when I'm trying to move the handle from the left to right, I'm starting to remove only darker pixels, which are on the left. As you can see, when I'm trying to drag the slider, at first nothing happens. It is because we start to remove pixels starting from absolute black color and move it to brighter areas and all the way to the white color. If you would start from the right side of the slider, we'll see effect almost immediately, just because on the right side we have much brighter color that is much closer to the white. I just showed you how to use the top slider for you to have general idea of what it does and how it works. But actually we very rarely use this, since in most cases we'll be using the bottom slider. Let me explain. Now, as you can see, when I'm trying to drag this slider, I'm removing pixels of this current gradient layer from dark pixels of all layers underneath it. And now when I'm dragging it from the right side, I'm removing this particular layer from all layers underneath it that have brighter pixels. Don't worry if it's a bit hard to understand, it's actually quite easy and useful tool. All you need to do is to play with it for some time and understand how it works, and then after this you'll be able to use it over and over again in order to make your photo look better. Why we even need to use it in the first place? Well, it's a good question. The simple answer is, in a very bright part of the image as well as in a very dark part of the image, there should be absolutely no color. Since we're using these sliders in order to remove color from flat color layers, we're removing colors from shadows and highlights, which makes it look how it actually looks in reality. So I strongly recommend you to try it yourself and just experiment to finally feel the difference and understand how it actually works. Another big thing you need to know about this that actually will make huge difference. As you can see, when dragging those sliders we actually have very harsh transition. In order to make it softer, you need to hold Alt and click one of those handles in order to separate them from one handle into area selection handle. With this you'll be able to have much more smoother and natural transition and remove pixels from both dark and bright areas much more naturally. Okay, now let's put this knowledge and use it with real layer, in this case skin layer. Drag the left handle of the bottom slider from left to the right, then use Alt click in order to separate handles and make the transition smoother. Then just make sure it looks as good as it can, and do the same thing with the handles on the right. Now let's check before and after. It's still very far away from perfect, but it's much better and much more natural than it was before. Okay, now let's repeat the same process, for example with hair layer. Drag the slider from the left, separate to make the smoother transition, and also do it for the brighter pixels, so separate the handle and make smoother transition. Repeat the very same process for all flat color layers. Feel free to get back and forth in order to polish results and make them look as good as they can. You don't need to stuck and look for perfection, just make them fairly accurate and as good as you possibly can. And after it's done, it's time for the finishing touches and the most important and fun part of the process, adding details. For this, all you need to do is to create new layer and change blending mode from normal to color. Also, just a good representation of why we need to remove color from brighter and darker pixels. If you take a look at how color wheel looks, it should give you some general idea. So as you can see on the vertical axis of the color wheel, we go from white to dark. And on the horizontal axis of the color wheel triangle, we go from absolutely no color, zero saturation, to maximally saturated color. As you can see, we reach the maximum saturation of the color around the center in terms of brightness and darkness. And while we going higher to the brightest pixel or lower to the darker pixels, we have less and less and less saturation until it's purely white or black color. Okay, enough theory, let's get back to colorizing details. So as you can see, I'm using very basic layer set to color mode and just selecting color from the color wheel and adding it to some small details, for example like in this case eye white. When colorizing details, be very carefully with saturation. Actually, in most cases you need less saturation than you think you need. For example, if you'd colorize eyes like this, maybe it look good if you will be doing some digital art and painting, but it actually doesn't look natural when you colorize real photos like this. So try to stay away from very saturated colors, and you rarely need to go over from the middle of the color wheel in terms of saturation. So slowly, using diffused and low saturation colors, add details to anything on the face. For example, right now I'm adding color to the pupils. As always, we are using the separate layers, so those changes are non-destructive and it's easy to get back and fix anything you need later if you feel like you did it too much or not enough. Okay, now that we have finished with pupil, let's proceed with sclera. Sclera is the bright red, sometimes pink, sometimes a bit even purple, part of the eye that actually touches the eyeball. In most cases it is lightly red or pink color. Even though it looks like a very small detail, very small change, and you feel like you need to zoom in order to see it. And actually, in reality, it is very important detail that can be seen from far and behind. Even though most people will not be able to explain what looks off when they will look at the face and especially at eyes, they will notice that something is off. So now let's zoom out and check the difference before and after adding those two small changes to the eye. Okay, it's enough at least for now. Let's create the new layer and proceed with colorizing lips. Again, as mentioned before, don't go too overboard with saturation of the color, especially when you colorize in lips of the man, because it will make it look like he used lipstick. In most cases, natural lips are not actually really red or pink. They are a mix of red and orange colors, sometimes even yellow colors. So just don't make it very saturated red color. Even though it looks like this at the moment, I'll make sure to carefully paint over the other areas and decrease the saturation of the lips in a few minutes. I intentionally do them a bit too saturated so I'll be able to see if I colorized it correctly. And then I'll blend it naturally in terms of saturation and tone using the hue saturation adjustment. Then I'll proceed to add some more details and accuracy to the colorization of lip. I'll add some more different colors and tones to the lip colorization, as well as you shouldn't forget that lip is not just the top surface of lip. You need to colorize underneath the lip and around the lips as well. Don't rush, allow yourself some time in order to make it perfect. I'll speed up this part of the video in order to save time. As you can see, especially when we zoom out, skin still doesn't look natural. He looks a bit too orange, too yellow, and a bit flat with his skin tone. So in order to fix it, let's add some other subtones to his skin. Let's create another empty layer, switch it blending mode from normal to color, and add some more tones to the face. Just because skin above and below the eyes is thin, you'll be able to see how blood circulates around the skin. That makes skin reddish. So add red tones to areas where skin is very thin, for example, nose, eyes, chin, or any other areas that you think it will be natural. Also feel free to add some reddish, orange, yellow, and even sometimes bluish tones to the skin. Especially in case like this, when the room is colored blue and his suit is colored blue, there will definitely be some reflection from the surroundings to the skin. So adding those reflection to skin will make it look more natural. So now let's get back again and polish some details of eyes, lips, ears, nose, and so on to make it look generally just more natural and human. So in order to make it even more natural and realistic, we need to add some more variation to colors. As you can see right now, colors are more or less flat. So if you look closer, image right now is colored with just few colors. Great tool to do this will be gradient maps. Difference between gradient adjustment layer and gradient maps are that gradient maps are working similarly to how blend if works. So on the left side of the gradient will be colors that will be added to the darkest areas of the photo. On the right side of the gradient will be colors that will be added to the brightest areas of the photo, and in the middle it will be added to the midtones. So the principle here is very simple and similar to what we already did. So just use already existing masks and selection from layers we already created. Then simply create gradient maps and applying them to those areas. Then just play with color a bit, find the most natural looking one and blend it naturally by either using blend if option or opacity option or both. Repeat those processes, use selection tools, use any adjustment layers you need, and keep adding details to photo. If anytime you feel something is wrong, something is missing, or you went overboard, in most cases you can easily fix it by just changing settings of adjustment layers or just simply creating the new layer and drawing on top. So now that you finished, let's do some final adjustments. In most cases, even if you followed all the advice, your photo colorization will not be perfect and it will look somehow weird, especially if you are inexperienced. As you can see on this particular example, photo is a bit too orange and unnatural. So for this we can just use AI in order to help us to fix things and add more details to photo. So just go to any photo colorization tool of your choice, for example Palette FM in this case, and let the photo be colorized by AI. After it is completed, just compare few versions that AI gives you and pick the most natural looking one. It is important to understand that we will not use AI just to replace our colorization we already did, but we will use it to add details, especially to some areas like skin that is actually difficult to colorize, especially if you don't quite understand how it works. So now that you compared few versions and picked the best looking one, just download it and let's get back to Photoshop. Just drag and drop this file inside your Photoshop project. Then just use free transform tool in order to stretch this image to fit the canvas. Try to turn it on and off few times to check if it actually fits the corners, and if not, just zoom in and check if those corners match with actual corners of the Photoshop canvas project. After it's done, everything else will be easy. Try to check if layer sits properly a few more times, then change blending mode from normal to color, and then just create inverted mask by clicking on mask button while holding Alt. It will help you to create inverted mask for this layer. Then just use brush and carefully draw over some areas in order to add some more color variation to them. As you can see with this particular example, adding more color and more variation to color, and especially removing color from some very dark or very bright areas actually make photo look much more natural overall. So yes, this is pretty much it. You can still play and add some more details, go back and revise any changes you did previously, but overall this is finished photo. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. I will be glad to help you with advice. Also, I'd strongly recommend you to check video about photo restoration I did earlier. It will help you to learn how to actually restore, improve and enhance all the damaged photos. So that's it for today. If you have any questions or concerns or anything else, just feel free to add them in the comments. So, goodbye.